Margaret stood outside the glass doors of Riverside Grill, her hands trembling slightly as she smoothed down her worn beige dress. The fabric was thin in places, mended carefully at the neckline where the seam had given way. Small stains dotted the bodice, remnants of coffee spills and kitchen mishaps that wouldn't quite wash out. Her light brown hair was pulled back simply, a few strands escaping around her tired face. She was 52 years old. Too old for this, she thought. Too tired for games. Her daughter Jennifer had set up this blind date, insisting with that gentle stubbornness children develop when their parents grow older. "Mom, you deserve happiness," Jennifer had said, squeezing her hand. "Just one dinner." "What's the harm?" Margaret had wanted to protest. She worked 2 jobs now, cleaning offices at night and helping at a bakery during the day. Her clothes were whatever still fit, whatever still held together. She had no time for the salon, no money for new dresses. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman who had weathered life's storms and barely kept her boat afloat. But Jennifer's eyes had been so hopeful. So Margaret had agreed. Now standing before this elegant restaurant with its warm lighting and well-dressed patrons visible through the windows, Margaret felt the full weight of her mistake. She didn't belong here. She should leave before embarrassing herself, before embarrassing whoever this poor man was. She turned to go. "Excuse me," a gentle voice said behind her. "Are you Margaret?" She turned back slowly. The man standing there was perhaps 55, with neatly styled dark hair touched with gray at the temples. He wore a tailored navy suit that fit him perfectly, a crisp white shirt, and a watch that probably cost more than her monthly rent. He was handsome in that distinguished way some men achieve with age, his jawline still strong, his dark eyes warm and steady. This was Thomas Chen, CEO of Chen Industries. Though Margaret didn't know that yet, Yes, Margaret managed, her cheeks burning. "I'm so sorry. I should have. I didn't know this place was so fancy. I can leave. I'm sure I'd rather have dinner with you," Thomas said simply. His voice was calm, genuine. "If you're willing to stay, I've been looking forward to meeting you." He held out his arm, not with flourish or show, but with quiet courtesy. The kind of gesture that spoke of genuine respect rather than performance. Margaret hesitated. She saw no judgment in his eyes, no disappointment, just patience, and something that looked like kindness. She took his arm. Inside, the restaurant was everything Margaret had feared. Crystal chandeliers cast soft light over white tablecloths. Other diners wore elegant clothes, their conversations a low murmur of sophistication. A few heads turned as they entered, eyes flickering over Margaret's shabby dress. Thomas seemed not to notice, or if he did, he gave no sign. He simply guided her to their table by the window, where the last golden rays of sunset painted the river beyond with amber light. "I hope you don't mind," Thomas said as they sat. "I asked for this table specifically. The view at sunset reminds me of something important." "What's that?" Margaret asked, grateful for something to focus on besides her self-consciousness. "That beauty doesn't need to be expensive to be real," Thomas said. "The river doesn't care about designer labels. The sunset doesn't charge admission. They just are what they are, perfectly themselves." Margaret felt something in her chest loosen slightly. She studied this man across from her, trying to understand him. "Your daughter told me you work at a bakery," Thomas continued, his tone conversational, easy. "I have to confess, I'm envious. I spent 40 years building a business, and most mornings I still don't know if what I do actually makes anyone's life better. But you help create the smell of fresh bread that makes people feel at home. That's real work, meaningful work." "I also clean offices," Margaret said quietly, testing him. "At night. I scrub toilets and empty trash cans." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "My mother cleaned houses when I was young. When my father passed, it was just the 2 of us. She'd come home with her hands raw from chemicals, too tired to eat sometimes. But she never complained. Not once." He paused, his eyes distant with memory. "She taught me that dignity isn't about what you do. It's about how you do it." She had more grace mopping floors than some people have in corner offices. Margaret found herself relaxing, truly relaxing, for the first time in months, maybe years. They ordered. Thomas asked questions, but not the intrusive kind. He wanted to know about her daughter, about the bakery's recipes, about whether she preferred city life or country quiet. He listened when she answered, really listened, the way people rarely do anymore. When the food came, Margaret noticed Thomas ate slowly, savoring each bite. Not performing for her, just present with the meal. She found herself doing the same, letting the flavors actually register instead of rushing through like she did at home, standing at the kitchen counter between shifts. "Can I tell you something?" Thomas said eventually, setting down his fork. "I almost canceled tonight." Margaret looked up, surprised. "I've been on a few of these blind dates," he continued, a slight smile touching his lips. "Set up by well-meaning friends who think I need companionship in my golden years. Each time, I meet someone lovely, accomplished, perfectly nice. And each time, I go home feeling more alone than before." "Why?" Margaret asked. "Because they were interested in Thomas Chen, CEO, not Thomas, the person." He shook his head gently. "They wanted access to wealth, to status, to the version of me that looks good in photographs. But that version doesn't know how to just sit quietly, be real, be imperfect." He looked at her directly then, and Margaret saw something vulnerable in his expression. "When I saw you standing outside," Thomas said, "looking nervous and real and completely yourself, I felt something I haven't felt in years. Hope that maybe, just maybe, I'd found someone who wouldn't need me to be more than I am." Margaret felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm wearing a stained dress to dinner with someone out of my league," she said, her voice wavering. "That's not me being noble. I didn't have anything better." "You're wearing honest clothes to dinner with someone who respects honesty more than fashion," Thomas replied gently. "And Margaret? You're not out of your league. I'm hoping desperately that I might be in yours." They talked until the restaurant began to empty. Thomas told her about his mother, about building his company from nothing, about the loneliness of success. Margaret told him about her late husband, about raising Jennifer alone, about the satisfaction of kneading dough at 4 in the morning. When they finally stood to leave, Thomas walked her to her car, an aging sedan with rust spots along the doors. "Would you consider seeing me again?" he asked. "Maybe somewhere less formal next time. There's a diner near my office that makes the best apple pie. Very humble place. I think you'd like it." Margaret smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "I'd like that very much. Good," Thomas said. He hesitated, then added, "Margaret, thank you for staying tonight, for not leaving when you thought about it outside. Thank you for giving us a chance." "How did you know I thought about leaving?" "Because I would have too," Thomas said simply. "If I were standing outside in clothes that didn't fit the scene, wondering if I belonged. But here's what I've learned. Belonging isn't about matching the furniture. It's about finding someone who sees you clearly and still wants to pull up a chair." 6 months later, Margaret and Thomas were married in a small ceremony by the same river they'd looked at on their first date. Margaret wore a simple cream-colored dress, new but not extravagant. Thomas wore a suit, but he'd left his expensive watch at home. What mattered, they'd both learned, wasn't how they looked together. It was how they felt, seen, accepted, and finally, peacefully home. The sunset that evening was particularly beautiful, painting everything golden. And it didn't cost a thing. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is show up exactly as we are. And sometimes the greatest gift we can give is accepting someone else who's done the same.